So I think that we'll start right here. Janet, I know that feeding the billions of mouths by mid-century is something that's been talked about a lot here. There's a lot of focus on increasing production. But as I've heard you talk about this issue, it seems that if we're going to be talking about the future of food, the policies we need to focus on are climate policies. Talk a little bit about this.
Thank you. I was really excited to hear that climate made Jerry's list of policy priorities for food and agriculture, because when thinking about the topic of this panel, what policies are going to affect the future of food, it occurred to me that so many of those key policies really lie outside the proper realm of agriculture. We need to be looking at education for women, population growth. Every night at the dinner table, there's 219,000 more mouths to feed, and many of them are ending up with empty plates. We need to look at water because 70% of the water used worldwide goes to agriculture. And then, of course, we have to look at climate. Talk to any farmer, climate and weather are incredibly important. And for a long time, farmers have always had to deal with the vagaries of weather. But things are changing now. Things are changing very quickly. Agriculture developed about 11,000 years ago. And since then, the climate has been relatively stable. That situation is starting to change. Temperatures are rising around the world. Rising temperatures affect food in a number of ways. One, you have higher temperatures. You have more heat waves. They last longer, and they're more severe. Heat can very quickly decimate a crop. There's a rule of thumb among crop ecologists that with each 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature above the optimum during the growing season, yields can fall by 10%. There's some research at Stanford University that looked at corn and soybeans in the United States historically, and they've found that that relationship may even be more intense. You can get up to 17% decline in yield with each 1 degree Celsius above the optimum. And of course, if you have a heat wave severe enough, you have complete crop destruction. Just thinking about the corn crop, the U.S. corn crop is the world's largest. Each piece of silk on an ear of corn needs to be pollinated. That pollen has to travel down that silk to create a kernel. If you have a dry and desiccated cornfield, you don't get any corn kernels. So higher temperatures hurt yields. Higher temperatures are also melting our mountain glaciers, which we call our reservoirs in the sky. Look at Asia's major rivers, and almost all of them start up in the mountains of the Himalayas. And they're glacier fed. So glacier runoff is very, very important during the dry season. In the short term, as these glaciers are starting to melt faster, we have more water, heavier river flows, and dams are bursting because of it. But in the long term, you start to lose that flow, you lose that reservoir, and that can be very important to farmers. As glaciers melt, we also have our ice caps melting in the Arctic and in Antarctica, which means rising sea levels. Think of sea level rising and what that does. It inundates rice-growing river deltas around the world. Think of Vietnam or think of Bangladesh, which are major rice-producing areas. You just get a meter or so of sea level rise, which is well within the realm of what we expect to see this century, and you flood many of those rice-growing fields. So climate change melts ice, it raises sea levels, and it also causes weather to become much more erratic. You get too much water at one part of the year, too little water, droughts can be prolonged. What we're seeing in California now is exactly what scientists predicted. Looking at the climate models, you can see that there could be prolonged drought trends in much of the western and southwestern parts of the United States. California is our fruit and vegetable basket, so drought is very serious. And the bottom line is climate change means that there really is no norm to return to. Everything's different. It's very complicated to farm and figure out when to plant and what to plant if you don't know how high the temperature will be or how much rain you're going to get. So it's very complicated. So at Earth Policy Institute, we have devised what we call Plan B, and a big part of Plan B is a plan to cut global carbon emissions by 80% very rapidly, and that involves dramatically increasing energy efficiency. It involves taking care of our soils and our forests, eliminating deforestation so we can help build up carbon in the soil, electrifying our transportation system so we can get off of oil, and then rapidly switching to renewable forms of energy so that we can get off fossil fuels completely and move to a greener economy, because we need to talk, the food community and the climate community need to talk, because really the future of food depends on a stable climate.
Thank you, Janet.